Well, do you have any advice you'd give to someone 6 to 12 months behind you?
Know your worth to your company and know what value you can provide other people. Make sure you're working on your personal brand more than you're working on your professional brand. I'm Brian Briscoe, host of the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. And this is a first deal episode where we walk through what it takes for someone to find, fund, and close on their first apartment complex. And if you're an aspiring investor yourself, you are probably trying to do exactly the same thing. So before we get to this episode, make sure you hit the subscribe button below and the little notification bell to make sure you get notified every single time we post a new episode. And now, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Guptill, and I'm very excited for today's show. Today, we've got an Ask the Expert episode featuring Brian Briscoe.
Wow. Hey, wait a sec. Aren't I supposed to be the one doing the intro?
I got in today, Brian. So you're on the back seat, but I'll actually put you first. So you're gonna be the one telling me everything.
All right, sounds good. Well, let's do this. Sounds like a good idea. I like it.
Let's do it. All righty. So Brian, tell us a little about yourself.
You know, that's a really, really good question. And usually when somebody asks me that question, I like to go back, to where I grew up. I grew up in Salt Lake City, and that's definitely part of who I am in a lot of ways. Most people who know me know I'm a big University of Utah fan, football, basketball, everything. I'm more of a fair weather basketball fan. Got 2 degrees in math from the University of Utah. And growing up in Utah, a lot of people ask me the religion question. Well, I'll just answer it by saying I went on a mission in Chile from mid-90s is all I'll say, but spent 2 years in South America serving a mission for the LDS Church. Finished, with my 2 degrees, and I started a PhD program at the University of Minnesota. Ideally, I wanted to get back to Utah. I wanted to teach math at the University of Utah. I started a PhD program because that's what you needed. You needed a PhD to teach math at the college levels. What I didn't realize, when I started the PhD program is I would never finish. I was dead set on finishing, but a month into the PhD program was September 11th, 2001. Terrorist attacks happened, and kind of interesting how it played out. I was actually at the recruiter's office on September 7th, 2001, just talking about, potential. Yeah, no kidding. Talking about the potential. Hey, I like the idea. Maybe I'll be a reservist, reserve officer or something like that. And I remember walking out of his office saying, no, thanks. I'm happy now. September 12th, I was back in his office, and, long story short, spent 20 years on active duty, a lot longer than I ever anticipated. In my garage right now, I still have a letter from the University of Minnesota saying that I could go back and finish my PhD whenever my tour with the Marines is done, is what it says.
Thank you for your 20 years of service.
Thanks. I think it'd be fun just to go back to the University of Minnesota, with that letter and see if they let me in.
20 years later. Maybe
20 years later.
You could give it a go.
No big deal. No big deal. So yeah, active duty, a couple of years later, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I was living overseas at the time with my family, couldn't quite bridge the half a world gap to try to buy a house. When we moved back to the States, I started buying single family, made a goal to buy 1 single family investment property a year, and got to number 2. And when I went for number 3, the lenders, it was 2009, 2010 at the time, and nobody was lending. It was just like.
Were you able to use your VA loans for that?
I used a VA loan on the first one. I used an FHA loan on the second one. Both of them I bought as owner occupant. Lending was extremely tight, especially on a single family home. Not knowing what I know now, when 2 lenders told me that they couldn't lend to me because I didn't make enough money, I stopped trying. Put my investment on pause. Fast forward 5 or 6 years later, recommitted to being a real estate investor, and got into some coaching about apartments. And from there, started picking up a couple of apartments here and there.
Was that with a program, or was that just kind of on your own buying apartments?
I started on my own. I started looking at, smaller properties. The first one that I actually went and toured is a couple miles from where I'm sitting right now in Idaho Falls. I remember walking out of one of the properties and thinking, okay, I've toured it. It looks like it's a good deal, but I don't even know how to tell if it's a good deal or not. And that
How
was
many units was that one?
8. It was, yeah, 8-unit apartment. And it was in the older area of Idaho Falls. It was like an 1890s build, old big
Oh, wow.
house that had been converted where they, conveniently put a wall here, kitchenette there, and turned it into an 8-unit apartment. But that kind of prompted me to learn more about it. That prompted me. I started out getting into an online course that was just a bunch of videos, is really all it was. And started going to events and eventually got into a formal coaching program. Started getting to as many groups as I could. I was going to Michael Blank events, Rod Cleef events, and I was in, several different multifamily investing groups online as well. And eventually found some partners. I think I found the education that I was looking for, which really helped me get the confidence I needed, and ended up finding a couple of partners, and that got us to our first deal.
Where'd you
And then
find
from
your
there-
partners? Was that at the events or through one of the programs you did?
It was through one of the programs. It was through one of the network channels that one of the programs had. It was a pay to play channel. They called it a mastermind, but it was really a Slack channel with a bunch of people in it that were interested in multifamily. I mean,
That's cool though.
it was, it's one of those things where it could have been great, but it was just okay. You kind of had to make your own way. There was nobody managing it. It was just, hey, pay $50 and you can get into my $50 a month and you can get into my mastermind. But, I started being active in that. I started looking for people who were interested in the same areas and the same types of deals. And at the same time, I was working on myself more than anything else, learning every aspect of the business that I could. And eventually one of the random phone calls that I had turned into hey, let's collaborate on a deal. That collaborate on one deal turned into, hey, let's try to collaborate on other deals, or eventually turned into, let's collaborate on everything in the state of South Carolina, because that's where our target markets overlap. And eventually the first deal I got under contract was in South Carolina, and that partnership ended up working out, bearing fruit. Closed on 9 deals with that particular partnership. I just left that partnership about a couple of months back, but long story about that. And now back to square one in a way. You've been busy.
You've been pretty busy the last couple of months.
I've been very busy the last couple of months. I have to break away from the job to spend time with my family, which sometimes I feel bad about. But
I could probably.
It is. I could probably work 16 hours a day and still have more stuff to do right now.
Totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, based off of that, what's your big burning why, as the former host of this podcast always asks?
That's a good question. Did I get fired? Former host. Oh, yeah. The previous host. Yes, that other guy. So my big burning why started out, and this is, what kind of take what I just said with a grain of salt. My big burning why at first was to be able to not miss time with my family. In the military, I could get told, hey, you're deploying in 3 weeks. Get ready to go. You're going to be gone for 7 months. And that's happened a couple of times. I'm not a fan of that. And it's very disruptive. And I've missed a lot of birthdays, a lot of Christmases. Getting through it was I needed an exit plan from the military. So that was my original big burning why. And that's what drove me for the first couple of years.
And was that when you were in single family, or is that when you had decided to transfer to the multifamily apartments?
That was right at the juncture where I decided to transfer. That's right at the juncture where I'm like, okay, I need an exit plan from the military. I really love real estate. And, I knew myself well enough to know that if I didn't have a really solid exit plan that I would never get out. I would wait until the military kicks me out, which at the rank I was at, I could have served another 8 years. It would have been the same thing over again. It would have been, okay, you're going to Iraq, or you're going to this next place that, we're having a war at or whatever.
Absolutely. And you definitely don't get multi-month deployment with real estate.
No, and I control my schedule now. And during the week, I do carve out time. I take my kids to gymnastics now. I take, my son just started karate, and I'll be taking him to his karate classes. And it's interesting because sometimes it's like 3:30 in the afternoon, and I'm the only dad in the whole place sitting next to a bunch of mothers. My original big burning why was to be able to get out of the Marine Corps and get out of a situation where I was forced to leave my family for long periods of time. Right now it's evolved, and it's more of how much good can I do in this world? How many people can I affect in a positive way? And
That's awesome.
Really yeah, thanks. What I've decided, and I think this all part of it started, the reason I started out talking about my church mission is, I've seen North American poverty, and it's North American middle class is like, or more North American poverty is like South American middle class, right? And South American poverty is like African middle class. But I've seen how a lot of people live in the rest of the world, and it tears at me. It really does. So really what I want to do is, how big of an impact can I have on the world and on other people? And I think the best way for me to do that is to help other people gain wealth. And so when they have that wealth, they can use it to, in turn, help more and more people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Time freedom. Plus when you have more resources, you can also give more. For instance, if you have missionaries who need somewhere to stay, now you own apartment buildings. Hey, I can give you a place to stay on me. And even if so that's cool though.
Or fund missions, or hey, you want to go on a mission, and you go, okay, I'll write a check for that. And the church I belong to, when you go on a mission, you've got to pay your own way. Well, when I went on a mission, my family didn't have the resources to pay my own way. And it was, a couple of people in our neighborhood pitched in to put me on a mission. And, since then I've always kind of had this yearning to, pay it forward. It's, I could go to these people and ask to pay them back, and they wouldn't accept it, first of all. But, so in a way, a lot of times it's just pay it forward and, figure out how to help, the next generation, the next people trying to do it. Yeah. My big burning why right now is about impact to others. How much good can I do? And how many people can I help?
That's a really good why. You mentioned your family, which by the way, pretty much everybody on this podcast mentions that a big reason they're doing it is for time freedom with their family, not missing birthdays, holidays, Christmas, things like that. So tell us about your family, your kids. You said you have your son in karate and your daughter in gymnastics. Do you have others?
I've got others. Yes, I have 5 total. So
congratulations.
Thanks. My oldest is a nursing student at the University of Utah. So she's married already. So I'm old enough to have a married child.
There we go.
She's 23. I've got a 20-year-old daughter who's living in Salt Lake, working at this really, really fancy restaurant. And she's an absolute amazing artist. I was helping her move and looking at her painting, and it just like blows me away at how good she is at that stuff. But
wow.
So she's 20, also living in Salt Lake City. And then I'm in Idaho Falls. My wife and I have been married for 24 years right now.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
I recently got married, so I have not had that experience.
About 23 and a half years behind us. No big deal.
Yep.
No, but and then at home, we have an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old. And
okay.
So that's where we're sitting right now.
Are you bringing them under your wing and carrying them along in real estate, taking them to view the properties, or not yet?
We don't have any local properties. That's the hard part. Is I've never invested locally. Not yet is the answer. I mean, they know what I do and we talk about it. But I will say this: my 11-year-old, I just told her last night that I would pay her $15 to read The Richest Man in Babylon, right? And I think that's probably the best book at her level that I think that would work for her. But It was funny. A couple years ago, my 9-year-old, he was probably 6 at the time. This is when I was still working full time, and I would come home from my full time work, get home at 6 o'clock, and a lot of times I'd open up the laptop and I'd sit at the kitchen table, and my son asked me why are you doing this, why, and I tried to explain it, and you put it in terms a 6-year-old can understand, is, well, I'm looking to buy an apartment building, and when I buy the apartment building, the people who live in the apartment building are going to pay me so they can live in my apartment building. He thought about it for a second, and then it was just like, one of those little light bulb moments you see in the cartoons. His face just lights up. He's like, Dad.
That's your 9-year-old?
That's 9 now. Yeah. He's like, Dad, you need to buy as many apartments as you can.
That's awesome, though.
And it's just like,
realized it.
Yeah, he got it. He got it. But yeah, I mean, the idea is I'm trying to teach my kids that there's an alternative. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a W-2. I was a W-2 employee for, probably 25, 26 years total. And, now I'm very much entrepreneurial, but I want them to understand that, there is a different way. You don't have to do a W-2.
When I was a kid, I didn't even know you could buy an apartment complex, or I didn't even think about that.
I mean, I knew somebody owned them, but I had no idea. I thought it was like some rich guy in that big house on the hill.
Exactly.
So not the regular Joes like me.
I don't know. Anyway, I'd say you've leveled up from the average Joe standpoint now.
Yeah, I grew up, I thought I was poor, and I mentioned that. I mean, my dad was a mailman. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. We didn't have a ton of money. Being a letter carrier for the post office doesn't pay extremely well, but so we didn't have a lot of the frills. We didn't have a lot of, extra, excess. We had what we needed. Yeah, I mean, just to see somebody coming from, your blue collar middle class background, and the way I knew my dad was a blue collar worker is he wore a blue collar shirt to work every day. So
there we go.
There you go. 100% blue collar, but yeah,
more blue collar than most.
Yeah, very, very blue collar. But yeah, that's how I realized, okay, if I can do it, pretty much anyone in this country can do it.
I agree. Yeah. And I just went to Rod Cleef's boot camp down in Denver, and that was the first time I had met other people in person who actually understood the potential about real estate, because I talked to everybody about it, which I'm sure you do too, because it's kind of a bug. And they're like, what are you doing?
Okay. Yeah. Oh, good luck with that. Yeah. I mean, that's the response I got with a lot of people is, yeah, good luck with that, and yeah, I mean, thanks. I'll go make
good luck was on your side.
Yeah. It's funny. People make luck. And I know it's, I talk about my first investment property falling in my lap. And I use that phrase once, and somebody pointed out, it probably didn't just fall in your lap. And when I start looking back at it, there was, a lot of hours of research, a lot of hours of calling. And this is my first single family property, a lot of hours of calling agents and, checking up on these for sale by owners, and, many hours of work. And then it ended up falling into my lap. But had I not gone through all that process, I guarantee that property never would have fallen in my lap. It was the same thing.
I can't remember. Grant Cardone says something like that. He's like, the harder you work, the luckier you get. You were you were a quote lucky, even though obviously you had done hours of research and stuff.
Yeah, and our first multifamily property kind of fell in my lap in similar fashion. I mean, it was a lot of work. I finally gained traction with a couple of brokers. I drove 8 hours I was living in DC, drove 8 hours to Columbia, South Carolina, met with a broker, and happened to meet with a broker a couple of hours after they got a verbal commitment from an owner to list a property. While I'm sitting with them, they're like, hey, we literally just got this. We don't have the financials yet. Do you want to go tour it?
That's a blessing. Wow.
And I mean, it literally fell in my lap. But once again, there was, hours and hours and hours of prep work before that property fell in my lap.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, tell us a little about that deal. Was it joint venture, syndication, or just yourself?
That was a syndication. That was the one I was talking about where, the partnership where we agreed to collaborate on
Oh,
anything
okay.
in South
Yeah.
Carolina. That's that deal right there. But yeah, I had driven to South Carolina to tour a different property. And, like I said, while I was at that property, they're like, hey, well, we're done here. We got a little extra time. Why don't you, if you want to see this property, let's go see it. And so the way that panned out is I went to the next property. I looked at it. I'm like, okay, it looks nice, but I was a little more excited about the first property that I looked at. We finished on that one. At the time, I didn't really have the capacity to juggle multiple properties, right? We finished underwriting the one, we put an offer in, we waited until, okay, we didn't get the offer. Okay, great. And then all of a sudden it was like, is that property in Spartanburg still available? And the way this one panned out is the broker said, actually, probably. I'm like, what do you mean probably? Well, the owner told us not really to market. The owner told us he wanted to sell and then came back and said, okay, maybe I don't. I'm like, so is it available? The broker said, put in an LOI, we'll pitch it to the owner and we'll see if that's how we'll be able to tell if it's available. Basically, what I learned is I was the only one interested in that property. I was the only one that knew that property, that seller was even interested in selling.
That doesn't happen very often. Wow.
No, it doesn't happen. And so we came forward, we put in our best offer and the owner countered and we hit him at his counter mark and we got the property under contract. It was a syndication. It was a $4 million purchase. We had to raise about 1.8 to get there. That capital raise is probably still today one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life. Had a lot of sleepless nights the week before we were supposed to close, and we weren't even sure until the morning of that we would be able to actually close. We get to the last day on the contract and waiting for that closing attorney, the title attorney, to send us the amount to close, and it's like, okay, good, we have enough in the account.
That's a
big
blessing.
Sigh of relief.
Funny
Wire
story.
the money. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
funny now.
Funny story.
But,
I actually,
yeah.
we have a deal under contract right now in outside San Antonio, and that one is closing pretty soon. And I'm helping raise capital for that. And we're like, oh
Yeah.
boy, it's coming up quick. And so I kind of can relate. Keep my wife up at night, calling people and stuff.
Yeah. It's, oh geez. And I think that's, somebody asked me a little while ago, what's the biggest myth in multifamily? And my answer is, if you have a good deal, the money will come. That's the biggest myth. And I think it's really easy to believe. It's really easy for people to want to believe that, because you don't want to do a difficult capital raise. You want to think it's going to be easy.
Exactly.
Yeah. It turns out that most people struggle on their first capital raise. And this is going to be, I've recorded over 300 episodes. I think 310 is how many episodes I've recorded. And it's a common theme. Most people struggle on their first capital raise because, most people are not quite prepared for what it's going to take to raise, $1 or $2 or $3 million.
I agree.
So,
yeah. It's been an eye opener just for me. So I can imagine that it's the same with everybody else. So yeah, how do you go about raising capital? Did you have some wealthy friends who were having hundreds of thousands of dollars in their bank account, or did you already have some real estate relations that you called?
I had zero wealthy friends that I knew of that had hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was a mad dash. It was a scramble. It really was. It was going to everybody and doing. There's SEC regulations. It was a 506B, so you have to establish a relationship and then pitch the deal. But we were really, narrow with that timeline. It's like, okay, I met you yesterday. Hey, let's talk. That didn't go over extremely well, but I quickly exhausted my personal network and didn't get anybody investing. Went to a lot of conferences, went to a lot of real estate meetups where I knew there were people who were willing to invest. Started meeting as many people as I could, and then just really started following up. And fortunately, I had a couple of partners who were doing the same thing, and eventually we got there. Eventually, we got to the number we needed to get to, and I thought I was going to be hard pressed to raise $250,000 out of the 2 million that we needed, 1.8. But I think I ended up raising about 600,000 on the first deal.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was more than I anticipated, but it was literally going to these conferences, going to these meetups, and getting as many business cards as I could. And then when you come home, it's just, okay, I'm going to email every single person that gave me a card, or I'm going to go on that Hoova app, download the contact list, and, email every, call or email every single person on that list. And hey, let's hop on a call, get to know each other a little bit. So that was really what it was just going through the process and hustling and putting forth a whole lot of effort. And end of the day, that's what it took to close. So
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you were still serving in the military, weren't you?
I was, yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Closing day, I literally, you told my boss, I'm like, boss, I'm going to be gone for a couple hours. I got some personal things to take care of, and got some documents notarized and signed and sent them off. And I remember a couple days later, I was actually on the phone outside the Pentagon with the broker. Did we close? Did we close? Did we close? Yeah. So that was all still while active duty.
That's awesome though. Yeah. So tell me about your tribe of Titans, which I personally have. I like the setup of that, and I recommend it to everyone who listens to this. But tell us a little bit about that, and then tell us about your next step after leaving your former partnership.
Yeah. So Tribe of Titans, that's kind of how that came about. Is I've always enjoyed teaching. I've always enjoyed, giving back. And I think everything that I was really involved with growing up, I was on the swim team. And so naturally I wanted to teach people how to swim and whatnot. But I was always looking to teach, and I enjoyed teaching. And even while I was raising capital for the first deal, I found that I really enjoyed the conversations where people were like, hey, tell me how you got your first deal under contract. Hey, congratulations. I don't have any money to invest, but tell me how you did it, and I found myself getting sucked into those conversations because I really enjoyed them. Over the years, I've taken a lot of time speaking to people, who are interested in investing. And the coaching program that I was in, it was a Michael Blanc coaching program. He actually would refer a lot of people to me. So, he funneled a lot of people my direction, and I was kind of the testimonial for him. And so I talked to a lot of people about investing. And I realized that, I kept on answering the same question over and over again. And instead of coming up with answers on the fly, when somebody would ask me a question, the next day, as I'm, on the train driving home, train home from the Pentagon, I would answer the question, usually on my phone on a notepad or something. And I just type up answers to the questions. Oh, so-and-so asked me this question last night. And I started getting kind of my own little library of content. The next time somebody asked me that question, I would have a good, solid answer to give them. And it wasn't just, me thinking, pulling, things out of the blue. It was a more deliberate answer. And that's really how the Tribe of Titans started. Was number one, I like talking to people about it. I like helping people. I like doing that, and starting to write everything down. And so when you get in there and you start looking at the content, the vast majority of the content in there came from, okay, I've been asked that question now 3 different times in the last couple of months. I'm going to write something up about it. Right.
Yeah. So more people can see it. That's nice.
Yeah. I think it ended up helping me more than anybody else, because I was able to think about their question and do a little bit of research and come up with good answers so that I could answer their questions better next time. But that's kind of like the backbone for the content. You've seen on the inside, I have this multifamily mastery course, which is included with a subscription price. And that's where all that content ended up, was that multifamily mastery course. We have a toolbox that has a lot of documents, and we've got some documents from our lawyers, got some documents from, a lot of other sample documents that goes into the toolbox, everything you need to be able to syndicate. Essentially, we've got some professionals who are in the Tribe of Titans who are able to answer questions. We've got a CPA, we've got a couple of mortgage brokers, we've got an insurance rep, we've got some cost seg people who are in there and able to answer questions if anybody poses them. And we also have a lot of live events. Yeah, the live events are, we have a weekly underwriting course, we have a capital raising course that's going on. So the idea is to eventually make it a one-stop shop for people who want to invest. You want to learn about CRMs? Well, hey, guess what? We've got a module on that and a whole bunch of different demos on there. You want to learn about investor platforms? Hey, guess what? We got that too. And eventually I want to make it a one-stop shop where you have networking opportunities. You have a lot of people who are trying to do the same thing where hey, I joined this program and everything I need is right at my fingertips. I've just got to reach out and grab it. So that's the idea.
A more inclusive, multifamily version of Bigger Pockets, sort of.
I do honestly. There's a lot of Bigger Pockets stuff in there, and I was able to speak to Scott Trench. He's the CEO of Bigger Pockets. Met him at a conference in Denver 6 or 8 months ago. And he was kind enough to give me some of his time afterwards. So a lot of what he told me, I asked him very, very pointed questions about growing communities. And funny that you mentioned Bigger Pockets, because a lot of what I'm doing in there is modeled off of Bigger Pockets, or modeled off Scott Trench's, that conversation with Scott Trench. And one thing I want to do is I want to keep a very low barrier to entry. You try to get in. I mean, in 2018 I paid $2,000 for an apartment investing class that's basically I've got an equivalent class included for free with your membership to Tribe of Titans right now. So I want to keep the barrier to entry low so that anybody can get in. And I think that's the best way for me to help more and more people is keep that barrier to entry low and start providing more and more content, more and more value, so that people who get in have everything they need to succeed. They just have to reach out and grab it.
That's great. And the more and more people that you train on your podcast or on Tribe of Titans, those people will go out and make quality landlords, which if you've seen some really, really rundown properties, and those kind of landlords, the next generation, the Brian Briscoe generation, are going to come in and lift them up, make people actually have a reasonable place to live instead of, roof leaking. And some of those properties are pretty gnarly. So it's awesome when you can go in and restructure them.
We've bought one or two that, had hair on them, and we've done a lot of that cleaning up too. So it's, that's the idea. And it's starting to snowball. We're getting a lot more traction, a lot more people. The nice thing is, I would say the first 100 people that got into the Tribe of Titans were all personally invited. I personally invited them. Hey, come join the tribe. But we're starting to get more and more names that I don't recognize. And I think we've hit that point to where that there's a lot more word of mouth. And in the last 3 days, we had 6 people join, and I only knew 2 of the 6. It's just like, okay, I don't know who these 4 people are, but they're in my tribe now. So yeah, send them each a message and said, hey, let's hop on a phone call and let's get to know each other. But yeah, so that's where the tribe's going. Eventually, we're going to add on courses. I want to make a more formal underwriting course, and then a more formal deal finding course. And then we're hiring a community manager right now. And, that should help out. Got a lot of applications. I know you're interested in that one, but we'll talk about that soon. That should raise the level in there. But
that's neat.
Long story long, that's the Tribe of Titans.
There we go. And it's a pretty neat community. So I have a little bit of questions about your first deal. So like, how many units was it? Was it C, D, B?
Yeah. First one.
Go ahead.
So the first one, good. Yeah. So as far as purchase price was $4 million, it was actually 2 different apartments that were about 1.5 miles away from each other. One was downtown Spartanburg, and one was just outside of downtown Spartanburg. So, Spartanburg's not a huge city. The downtown's probably, 5 blocks by 10 blocks, right? So, not very many, tall buildings either. But one of the buildings had 39 units. The other building has 16 units, so a total of 55 units.
Oh, okay.
Total purchase price $4 million. And
so that's less than 100,000 a door.
Yeah, we bought it about 75 a door. It's a old building though, and that's one thing that I walked in thinking C class. It's one building was built in the 30s, one building was built in the 40s, and old buildings come with old building problems, by the way, which is something that we put a little extra money, extra dollars in our budgets because it was an old building, not knowing where the expenses would come from. And I'm glad we did, because we've been able to be pretty close to our pro forma numbers on, well, pretty close. We got hit pretty hard by COVID on that property, but yeah, so that property, when we got the appraisal, I was surprised the appraiser, called it a B-class property, and it's in a really good location. It's in fairly good condition. It doesn't have a whole lot of amenities, but it's very walkable to all of the amenities. So
Okay.
technically, according to the appraiser, a B class. I think I would have called it, a C plus. But
There you go.
what's really nice about it is downtown Spartanburg is very walkable. There's a lot of restaurants, a lot of shopping, just like these little boutique places. But it's got a lot of character. It's in a great location, and so far it's done fairly well as an investment. So the
Sounds like
capital
it.
raise
That's
was
cool.
difficult, but I mean, we offered a 6% preferred return, and I think we're 3/4 behind on our pref right now, and most of that was carried forward from COVID. But it's cash flowing, and we're paying distributions.
Well, that's why we do this cash flow, so that's good.
Yeah.
And what's the unit count on that? Is it more family friendly, or is it
Oh,
like more studios?
Studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. There's not a whole lot of families that are there. It is downtown, so you're seeing a lot of people who are like downtown working professionals. I don't think things have changed very much, but there were only a couple of units that there were kids, so
Okay.
it's more of an adult, 20 something, 30 something, maybe two people with, hey, going in with a roommate, getting a 2 bedroom type, more than it's a family place.
Okay. So now 4 or 5 years later, what's next for you? I mean, you've obviously been really busy with leaving your partnership, forming 2 businesses, and I assume working on some deals at the same time. So tell us a little about that.
Oh yeah, working on deals. One thing that I really want to do is always provide a way for the non-accredited investor to invest. And I find, some people will call it a loophole, but when you look at the definition of an accredited investor, one thing that can make you an accredited investor is if there is an entity with more than $5 million in assets. And I started thinking about, okay, how can we get non-accredited investors into deals that are limited to accredited investors only? And I found my answer. And so what I'm doing is I'm setting up an entity where we can pool assets. It's a fund is what it is, but I'm setting up a fund where we can provide a vehicle or an avenue for the non-accredited investors to invest in deals that are exclusive to accredited investors, right? So that's one thing I'm doing. It's a 506B fund. It's not set up yet, so I'm not going to talk specifics about the fund, but my lawyer would probably make me say that. Yeah, so I'm not talking specifically about the fund because it's not set up yet, but eventually I want to set up a 506B fund to be able to bring non-accredited investors into these accredited deals, get that fund up to $5 million in assets. So for near future, I'm setting up funds. I'm going to be a fund manager. So I'm looking for the experienced operators, people who've been in business for 5 or 10 years or longer, and who are operating in cities that I like and I can get behind, and bringing capital to their deals. So through the fund. So basically, the value that I provide to people is I have relations with a lot of people, and doing 310 or so episodes of a podcast, you get to know a lot of people. You get to start building relationships with a lot of people. So I can go back my Rolodesk of podcast episodes and say, okay, I trust that guy, I trust that guy, I trust her, I trust them, and so what I'm doing right now, like I said, is just going to these operators that I know, like, and trust in the metros that are growth metros, and finding places where I can insert this fund and bring people into deals. So that's the idea.
Awesome. Give people a stepping stone for getting into multifamily.
Yeah, get people into multifamily, and I'll also occasionally do a 506c deal that's, open only to accredited investors, but really I always want to maintain a path for the non-accredited investors to invest.
And then are you looking at investing in your hometown or near there? So, you can have your kids mow and stuff?
Yes, is the answer. Idaho Falls, I think there's 70,000 people here. If you add all the outlying communities that is like, I guess, Idaho Falls metro area, if that exists, maybe you get up to 100,000 within, a 15-mile radius. But the issue here is there's not a lot of inventory, and part of that's just part of the issue is I pulled a CoStar report, and I think there's 30 apartment complexes that are 40 units or greater.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in a 15-mile radius. So when you start looking at what's available, there's about 30 that would be big enough that I would call, big enough to syndicate. Yeah, when I start buying, I will start buying stuff here. When I do start buying stuff here, it's probably going to be the 2 to 4 plexes, and just put a property management company on it. But I'm very interested in Idaho Falls. Just it's not a big city and there's not a lot of inventory.
I can relate to that. We're on the opposite end of Idaho, up in Coeur d'Alene, and the population is fairly similar, except we do have one advantage. People are building and building. So we're being patient and waiting for an opportunity to present itself.
We do have a lot of things going up. I was talking about a builder to potentially partner with them on a apartment complex. They were kicking around the idea of a 200 unit apartment complex on the north side of Idaho Falls, and I was seeing if we could fund it, help fund the deal and then operate it once they were done. But we'll see if that happens. There are other ways to get into the business, but existing inventory is low. I'm gonna have to find a different route.
Well, do you have any advice you'd give to someone 6 to 12 months behind you as an expert?
6 to 12 months behind me.
Yeah.
Know your worth. Yeah, if you're going 6 to 12 months ago, I left Four Oaks. I was part of Four Oaks for almost 4 years. I made the decision to leave Four Oaks 6 months ago, and I would just say, don't get comfortable, don't get complacent. Okay, always be observant and understand what's going on around you. Looking back at it, I probably should have decided to leave Four Oaks 12 months ago. Know your worth to your company and make sure you're working on your personal brand more than you're working on your professional brand. Because in my mind, I had kind of tied my worth and my value to the Four Oaks brand, which was not necessarily true. It's not at all true, actually. Know your worth and know how you fit into things. Know what value you can provide other people. And it really took me a couple of weeks to really sit down and see what kind of value I provided to other people, to realize that, yeah, I can leave Four Oaks and probably do a whole lot better. And so, yeah, somebody who's 6 to 12 months behind me, know your value.
There we go. Yeah. Well, where can people find out about you and communicate with you if they'd like to?
I have a podcast. It's called the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. If I'm allowed to come back on and host again, the best ways to reach out to me, email address, brian@streamlinecapitalgroup.com. The websites that we operate, we have the tribeoftitans.info. And I also have just streamlinecapitalgroup.com. So go to those websites. The Streamline Capital Group website is aimed at people who want to passively invest. If you're interested in investing in, one of my funds, that's the best place to go. If you're interested in being a member of the Tribe of Titans, the tribeoftitans.info, little pop-up will click the button, it'll take you there. So
there you go. And we'll have all those down in the show notes if you guys want to find Brian. Well, Brian, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. If I were in person, I'd shake your hand, but yeah, looking forward to speaking again, and good luck on your new businesses.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyler.
Yep.
Hey, if you like that episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button. But more importantly, if you haven't joined our multifamily educational community, the Tribe of Titans, yet, you are missing out. So get yourself 30 days free by clicking the link below in the description, or go to thetribeoftitans.info, and we'll see you there.